Hello, welcome to Tales After Midnight, the place where we uncover the stories history tried to erase and the truths that were never meant to be spoken aloud. Tonight, you're about to hear something that challenges everything you were taught about war, heroism, and the shadows behind victory. Now, let's begin. What if everything you were ever taught about World War II had been carefully edited, trimmed, and reshaped to conceal some of the most disturbing military operations ever carried out on foreign soil? What if the warriors who fought using methods so ruthless, so psychologically crushing that their own government sealed the records away for 80 years were not foreign soldiers at all, but Americans? Before we reveal what the military buried inside classified vaults spread across Fort WWII, Andrews Air Force Base, and the National Archives Annex in Kansas City, I need you to do something. First, leave a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Second, hit that subscribe button, because this channel depends on your support to keep exposing the secret history they never wanted you to know. The algorithms are already pushing this content into the shadows. Your subscription is the only thing keeping these stories alive. On the morning of December 8th, 1941, just 23 hours after Pearl Harbor was reduced to smoke and fire, a telegram arrived at the San Carlos Apache Reservation in Arizona. The paper itself was standard War Department issue, ordinary in every way, but the message it carried was anything but. It requested the immediate presence of tribal council members at Fort WWII for what it described as a matter of national security and cultural preservation. By nightfall, 12 Apache elders had crossed the Sonoran Desert and arrived at the military installation. What took place during that meeting would never appear in any official wartime record. The conference room was small and windowless, illuminated only by a single overhead bulb that cast long, distorted shadows against the concrete walls. Sitting across from the elders were three men in army uniforms, all of them stripped of name tags and rank insignias, as if their identities themselves were classified. The oldest of the three, a man the Apaches would later refer to only as a colonel, placed a leather folder on the table between them but did not open it. "Gentlemen," he began, and his voice carried a faint tremor that hinted at exhaustion or perhaps something far darker. "We are about to ask you to help us win a war using methods that will never be acknowledged by this government or any other. What we discuss tonight will be classified at levels that surpass even our nuclear program. If you agree to what we are proposing, you will be training men to become something the world has not witnessed since your ancestors fought in these mountains. You will be creating ghosts." The tribal chairman, a man named Joseph DeSauce, studied the officer's face for a long, heavy moment before responding. His reply, preserved in a single declassified fragment that surfaced in 2014, was chilling in its simplicity. "Our grandfathers knew how to make an enemy fear the dark. If you want us to teach your soldiers that art, you must understand it comes with a cost. Once a man learns to move like the wind and kill like the mountain lion, he does not easily return to be a man who sleeps peacefully." What the military was proposing went far beyond the famous Navajo Code talkers who would later receive recognition and honor. This was something altogether different. This was about weaponizing ancient Apache guerrilla tactics, psychological warfare techniques passed down through oral tradition, and fusing them with modern military training to create units that would operate in the deepest shadows of both the Pacific and European theaters. The program was never given an official name in any documentation that has since been discovered. Researchers who spent decades assembling fragments from scattered and often contradictory sources refer to it simply as the Shadow War Initiative. By January 1942, the first volunteers arrived at a newly constructed facility located 30 miles northeast of Fort WWII, hidden inside a box canyon that had once served as Apache hunting grounds. The location was chosen deliberately. The military wanted the trainees to feel the presence of their ancestors, to awaken something primal that could never be taught in a conventional boot camp. 147 men reported for training. Only 63 would complete it. The others vanished from all military records. Their families received brief telegrams stating that their loved ones had been transferred to classified assignments. No further information was ever provided. The training that unfolded in that canyon over the next 6 months has been described in fragmented testimonies and heavily redacted documents as unlike anything the military had attempted before or since. The men learned how to move through terrain without disturbing a single leaf, how to navigate by stars and by scent, how to survive for weeks behind enemy lines with no supplies. And perhaps most disturbing of all, they were taught how to inflict psychological terror, the kind that shatters an enemy's will long before physical confrontation ever becomes necessary. A journal entry from Lieutenant Robert Chun, one of only 3 non-Apache officers permitted to observe the training, was discovered among his personal effects after his death in 1998. The entry, dated March 14, 1942, reads, "Today I witnessed something that made me question whether we are truly the good guys in this war." The instructors demonstrated what they called a fear walk. It involves stalking an enemy position for hours, leaving signs that you are there, but never revealing yourself. You move objects just slightly. You leave marks that suggest something inhuman has passed through. You create sounds a human brain cannot quite identify. By the time you finally engage, the enemy is already psychologically defeated. They are fighting ghosts, and ghosts cannot be killed. Chun continued, "I asked Sergeant Chino if he worried about what would happen to our men when they returned home after learning these techniques. He looked at me with eyes that seemed far older than his 24 years and said, 'They won't all return, and the ones who do will not be the same men who left.' I am beginning to understand what he meant." The first deployment of these Apache units took place in June of 1942. 12 men were inserted into the Philippines, where they were tasked with. They were operating deep behind Japanese lines in the dense jungles of Mindanao. Officially, their mission was listed as intelligence gathering. In reality, it was something far more sinister. They were carrying out what modern military analysts would later describe as hyper-aggressive psychological operations combined with targeted assassinations, carefully designed to generate maximum terror with minimal direct engagement. Lieutenant Kenji Yamamoto, a Japanese officer whose diary was recovered after the war and later translated by American intelligence, described encounters with what he believed were supernatural forces. His entry from August 3, 1942, recounts an incident that left 20 of his men dead without a single shot being fired. "We found Sergeant Nakamura hanging from a tree at dawn. His throat had been cut, but there was no blood on the ground beneath him. Around the tree were markings we could not identify, symbols that seemed to move when you looked at them directly. That night, we heard sounds in the jungle unlike anything I have encountered. Not animal, not human, something else. By morning, 6 more men were dead, each killed in their sleep, their eyes wide open as if they had seen something that stopped their hearts. We found no footprints, no disturbances, nothing to indicate any human had been in our camp. My commanding officer has ordered us to abandon this position. The men are terrified. They speak of demons and spirits. I do not know what is hunting us, but it is winning." What Yamamoto did not know, and what would not be revealed until classified documents were partially declassified in 2006, was that only 2 Apache soldiers had been responsible for the deaths of those Japanese troops and the complete psychological collapse of an entire battalion. The techniques they used were never officially documented, but surviving fragments suggest they combined traditional Apache stealth methods with newly developed chemical compounds designed to produce hallucinogenic effects when absorbed through the skin, along with acoustic devices that generated subsonic frequencies known to induce extreme anxiety and paranoia. Back at the training facility in Arizona, a second wave of recruits was undergoing even more intense preparation. The military had learned from the first deployment that the Apache methods were extraordinarily effective, but they wanted to expand and intensify the program. By late 1942, the facility had grown to house more than 300 trainees and instructors. It had also gained a disturbing reputation among the regular military personnel stationed at Fort Wooka. Soldiers reported seeing lights in the canyon at strange hours, hearing sounds that defied any logical explanation, and encountering men from the facility who moved and spoke in ways that felt deeply wrong. as if something essential about them had been stripped away. A report filed by Captain James Morrison, the base psychiatrist, in November of 1942, raised concerns that were immediately classified and buried. The report stated, "I have now examined 17 men who have had contact with personnel from a canyon facility. All describe similar symptoms: persistent nightmares, a constant sense of being watched, and an inability to feel safe even in locked rooms with guards posted. 3 have requested immediate transfer to combat units, stating they would rather face the enemy than remain on a base with what one corporal described as men who have stopped being men. I attempted to visit the facility to assess the mental health of the trainees, but my request was denied by order of command I cannot identify. I am deeply concerned about what is being created in that canyon, and what will happen when these individuals are deployed into combat situations where there is no oversight or accountability." Those concerns were not unfounded. Between 1942 and 1945, Apache shadow units were deployed to every major theater of the war. They operated in Italy, France, Germany, across the Pacific Islands, and in China. Their missions were never coordinated with regular military command structures. They received their orders through a separate chain of command that reported directly to a classified office within the War Department, an office that officially did not exist. When conventional military units encountered evidence of their operations, they were given cover stories involving special forces, local resistance fighters, or unexplained enemy casualties. In the Ardennes forest during the Battle of the Bulge, a German battalion reported being systematically destroyed by what they described as ghost soldiers. A letter from Oberleutnant Hans Richter to his wife, intercepted by Allied intelligence, described the final days of his unit. "Marta, I do not think I will see you again. We are being hunted by something that defies explanation. Every night, more men disappear. We find them days later. If we find them at all, always in places that should have been impossible to reach without us seeing or hearing anything. The Americans have unleashed something from the old world, something that remembers when warfare was about breaking the spirit before breaking the body. Our officers tell us to hold the line, but there is no line. There is only the forest and the things that move within it. Last night, I saw one of them, just a glimpse in the moonlight. He was covered in markings, and his eyes reflected the light like an animal's. He looked at me, and I felt my courage drain away. I know now why our men are deserting. It is not cowardice. It is survival instinct. Some things are not meant to be fought." The German unit surrendered 3 days later, marking the first time in the war that an entire Wehrmacht battalion had surrendered without engaging in direct combat. When questioned by American intelligence officers, the German soldiers all told similar stories of supernatural encounters, relentless psychological torment, and an enemy that seemed to be everywhere at once, unseen but always present, and nowhere at the same time. The intelligence reports describing these events were immediately classified and removed from the normal chain of documentation, sealed away as if they had never existed. In the Pacific, the operations grew even more extreme. On Okinawa, Japanese defenders began reporting attacks by what they called the silent ones. These were enemy combatants who never spoke, never fully revealed themselves, and seemed capable of infiltrating even the most secure positions without triggering alarms or meeting any form of resistance. A report from the Japanese High Command, discovered after the war in the ruins of a bunker, described an incident in which an entire command post was found with every person inside dead. The body showed no signs of struggle and no external wounds. Medical examination suggested they had died from what modern forensics would identify as extreme stress-induced cardiac events. All in the same night, all at approximately the same time. An American Marine Corps after-action report from May of 1945, partially declassified in 2009, described encountering the aftermath of what was clearly an Apache shadow unit operation. The report stated, "We advanced into the cave system expecting heavy resistance based on intelligence suggesting it was a major Japanese supply depot and command center. Instead, we found approximately 80 enemy combatants, all dead. The scene was unlike anything I had witnessed in 3 years of combat. The bodies were arranged in patterns that appeared deliberately designed to create maximum psychological impact. Some were positioned as if they were still alive and watching the entrance. Others had been moved to locations that should have been physically impossible. The entire complex smelled of something I cannot identify, something that made us all intensely uneasy. My men refused to remain in the caves. Several became physically ill. We marked the location and withdrew. I recommend this site be sealed and avoided. Whatever happened here went beyond conventional warfare. By the spring of 1945, as the war in Europe came to an end and the Pacific Campaign intensified, the Apache shadow units had built a combat record that was both extraordinary and deeply disturbing. They had carried out more than 200 documented operations, though many researchers believe the real number was far higher. Their confirmed kill count exceeded 3,000 enemy combatants. More importantly, they had shattered the morale of countless enemy units, triggered mass desertions, and created a psychological weapon that may have shortened the war by months. But there was a cost the military had not anticipated and was completely unprepared to confront. The men who had been transformed into these shadow warriors were not easily transformed back into ordinary soldiers, let alone civilians. Reports began filtering back from the Pacific in the final months of the war, describing incidents in which members of Apache units became unresponsive to commands, attacked friendly forces when startled, or simply vanished into jungle and were never seen again. A classified medical report from a field hospital in the Philippines dated July 19, 1945, described treating 3 soldiers from an Apache shadow unit who had been found wandering in a state doctors described as a form of combat psychosis unlike anything previously documented. The report noted, "These men do not respond to normal psychiatric interventions. They speak in languages that do not correspond to any known Apache dialect. They demonstrate physical abilities that appear enhanced beyond normal human capacity. When sedated, they exhibit REM sleep patterns associated with extreme trauma. But when conscious, they show no obvious signs of distress. It is as if they exist in a state between full consciousness and some other mode of being. I have recommended they be transferred to specialized care, but my requests have been denied. I was informed by a colonel whose name I was instructed not to record that these men are to be kept isolated and that under no circumstances should their condition be documented in their official medical records." As the war ended and massive demobilization began, the military faced a critical problem. They had created highly trained killers who had been conditioned to operate outside all normal rules of warfare, who had been psychologically altered to embrace methods that violated every convention of civilized combat, and who now needed to be reintegrated into peacetime society. The solution they chose was as cold as it was pragmatic. They simply made most of the Apache shadow warriors disappear from official records. Of the 237 men who completed shadow warrior training between 1942 and 1945, only 68 appear in any post-war military documentation. The others vanished from all records after their final deployment. Their families were told they had died in combat, but no bodies were ever returned. No graves were ever marked. No names were carved into memorials. They became ghosts in death just as they had been in war. The few who officially returned were sent to a facility that appears in no formal documentation, but is referenced obliquely in several declassified memos from the late 1940s. Located somewhere in the mountains of New Mexico, it was described as a rehabilitation center for special operations personnel. Letters that survived from men sent there paint a very different picture. One letter from a soldier named Thomas Nates to his brother, dated October 6, 1946, was discovered decades later among family papers. It read, "They tell us we are being helped, but this place is a prison. They keep us isolated from each other. They give us medications that make it hard to think clearly. They ask us questions about what we did during the war. But when we answer honestly, they become frightened. I think they are trying to make us forget. But you cannot. Forget what you have become. The training changed something fundamental. We learned to tap into aspects of our heritage that were never meant to be awakened. We learn to become what our ancestors warned us against becoming, and now they want to erase what they created. I do not believe many of us will ever leave this place. If you receive notice that I have died, do not believe it. We do not die easily. Not anymore. Thomas Nietzsche's official death certificate, dated November 3rd, 1946, states that he died of pneumonia at a veterans hospital in Albuquerque, New Mexico. No hospital records confirm that he was ever admitted to any facility in Albuquerque. His body was never returned to his family. He was 26 years old. The disappearances did not end with the conclusion of the war. Throughout the late 1940s and into the 1950s, a disturbing pattern began to emerge across the southwestern United States. Apache men, many of them too young to have served in World War II, started vanishing from reservations in Arizona, New Mexico, and Oklahoma. Tribal police reports from that period describe a strikingly consistent scenario. The men would receive visits from individuals claiming to be military recruiters or government officials. They would be told about special opportunities, classified programs, and ways to serve their country while honoring their heritage. Then they would disappear. A report filed by Officer Daniel B. of the San Carlos Apache Tribal Police in April of 1952 describes one such case. On the morning of April 9th, I was called to home of Margaret Goen, who reported that her son, Michael, age 23, had left 3 days earlier with 2 men in a black sedan bearing government plates. She stated the men told Michael he had been selected for a special program based on his family lineage. They mentioned his grandfather by name, Joseph Gozen, who had served in World War II in a classified capacity. Margaret has not heard from Michael since. When I attempted to contact the military liaison office at Fort Wooka, I was informed that no such recruitment had taken place and that I should not pursue the matter further. I was also advised, in terms that felt distinctly threatening, that continuing this investigation would be detrimental to both my career and the well-being of the reservation community. What the tribal police did not know, and what would not become clear for decades, was that the Shadow Warrior program had never truly ended. It had simply gone deeper underground. The onset of the Cold War created new demand for the kind of operatives the Apache program had produced. The military, along with the newly formed Central Intelligence Agency, recognized that in a world defined by nuclear standoffs and proxy conflicts, the ability to conduct operations that left no fingerprints while generating maximum psychological impact was more valuable than ever. A series of documents inadvertently declassified in 2017 revealed that between 1948 and 1963, a continuation program operating under the code name Night Wind recruited and trained more than 100 additional Apache operatives. These men were deployed to Korea, Vietnam, Guatemala, Iran, and numerous other locations where the United States conducted covert actions. Unlike their World War II predecessors, these operatives never officially existed. They had no military service numbers, no records, and no documentation of any kind. In Korea, stories began circulating among both American and enemy forces about something that moved through the mountains that seemed more spirit than soldier. A Marine Corps intelligence report from December of 1950, recently discovered in misfiled documents at Camp Pendleton, describes the interrogation of a captured Chinese officer who had been found wandering alone, apparently separated from his unit. The officer, speaking through a translator, described encountering what he called the wind that kills. According to the report, the prisoner became extremely agitated when questioned about the disappearance of his unit. He insisted they had been attacked by forces that could not be seen, that left no trace of their presence except the bodies of his comrades. He claimed these forces used weapons that made no sound, killed without leaving wounds, and appeared and vanished at will. He repeatedly stated that he had seen one of the attackers, describing markings on a man's face that glowed in the darkness and eyes that looked through him rather than at him. The prisoner refused to provide any further information and soon became catatonic. He died 3 days later from what medical personnel determined was acute cardiac arrest brought on by extreme psychological trauma. No physical cause of death could be established. In Vietnam, the pattern continued and intensified. Between 1964 and 1973, reports filtered back through various channels of American Special Forces of operatives who seemed to function outside any known command structure, who employed methods that shocked even hardened combat veterans, and who appeared to combine modern technology with something far older and more primal. A memoir published in 1998 by former Green Beret officer Captain Raymond Teller describes an encounter in the Central Highlands in 1967 that he had kept secret for more than 30 years. We were conducting a reconnaissance patrol when we came across what looked like the aftermath of a battle. An entire Viet Cong company, approximately 120 men, lay dead in a clearing, but there had been no battle. There were no shell casings, no blast craters, no signs of gunfire or explosives. The bodies showed various causes of death, but what struck me most were their expressions. Every single one of them looked absolutely terrified. Their eyes were wide open, their faces frozen in pure horror. Some had apparently died while trying to escape. Others seemed to have taken their own lives. We found 3 who had shot themselves in the head, as if they had chosen that rather than face whatever it was they had encountered. As we were examining the scene, one of my sergeants called me toward the tree line. There, carved into the bark of a large mahogany tree, were symbols I did not recognize. They looked like warnings, or perhaps markers of territory. My Montagnard guide took one glance at them and refused to go any farther. He said those marks belonged to the shadow hunters and that we needed to leave immediately. As we were pulling out of the area, I saw movement in the jungle canopy. Just for an instant, I saw a figure painted in patterns that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. He was watching us, making sure we left. I never filed an official report about what we witnessed that day. I knew it would either be classified or dismissed, but I have thought about it every single day since. The technology being used by these operatives had evolved dramatically since World War II. Declassified research documents from the Army's Chemical and Biological Warfare Division reveal that throughout the 1950s and 1960s, extensive studies were conducted into compounds capable of inducing extreme fear, paranoia, and complete psychological breakdown. One research summary from 1961, stamped with the highest classification levels, describes testing of a compound referred to only as Whisper Agent. According to the document, Whisper Agent demonstrated remarkable effectiveness in producing acute anxiety and auditory hallucinations in test subjects. When delivered in microdoses through skin absorption or inhalation, subjects reported hearing voices, experiencing visual distortions, and developing intense paranoia about their immediate environment. The effect could persist for 72 hours or longer. When combined with environmental stressors and isolation, Whisper Agent was capable of producing total psychological collapse in individuals who had previously shown no signs of instability. The document concluded that it was recommended for use in specialized psychological operations where plausible deniability regarding chemical agent deployment had to be maintained. The research was not limited to chemical agents. Another document from 1964 detailed acoustic weapons designed to generate subsonic and ultrasonic frequencies capable of inducing disorientation, nausea, and in some cases fatal cardiac events in targeted populations. These devices were small enough to be carried by individual operatives and could be deployed without leaving any obvious evidence of their use. A field report from Vietnam in 1968 describes the use of what was coded as nightboard technology by unidentified special operations personnel. The report stated, following deployment, enemy forces in the target area exhibited signs of mass hysteria. Radio intercepts indicated they believed they were under attack by supernatural forces. Multiple enemy combatants were observed fleeing into the jungle without their weapons. Several were recovered days later in states of extreme psychological distress, reporting experiences consistent with known symptoms associated with nightbird exposure. The operation achieved its objectives without a single round being fired, but the most disturbing revelations about the program did not come from official documents. They came from the men who had been recruited and somehow survived long enough to speak about it. In 2004, a former operative using the pseudonym David Nighthorse contacted a journalist with a story he said it can no longer keep buried. The resulting article was published in a small independent outlet and was quickly scrubbed from the internet. Only a handful of copies survived. In it, Nighthorse described being recruited in 1970 at the age of 19 from a Mescalero Apache reservation in New Mexico. They told me I had been chosen because of my bloodline. Nighthorse said, "They said my great-grandfather had been one of the original warriors and that I carried something in my blood that made me suitable for program. They took me to a facility I can't locate on any map. It was underground, carved into a mountain somewhere in the Four Corners region. The training was unlike anything you can imagine. They didn't just teach us how to fight or survive. They taught us how to access something they called ancestral memory. They used drugs, sensory deprivation, extreme stress, and techniques I still don't fully understand to break down our normal consciousness and rebuild it into something else. They taught us how to move through the world as if we weren't fully part of it, to be observers and actors at the same time, to see patterns normal people can't see, to influence others through presence alone. By the time the training was finished, I was not the same person who had entered that facility. None of us were." Nighthorse described being deployed multiple times between 1971 and 1976 to locations he was forbidden to identify. We would be inserted into hostile territories with objectives that were never fully explained. Sometimes we were told to eliminate specific targets. Other times we were simply told to create chaos and fear. We used every technique we had been taught, both the traditional Apache methods and the modern technologies they had developed. We were extraordinarily effective, but there was a cost. Every operation took something from us, made us less human, and more like the ghosts we pretended to be. Several of my teammates just walked away one day, vanished into the wilderness, and were never seen again. Others suffered psychological breaks and had to be institutionalized. The ones who survived usually couldn't reintegrate into normal life. We had been changed at a fundamental level. The journalist who published Nighthorse's story, Michael Torres, attempted to verify the claims and quickly found himself running into obstacles at every turn. When he attempted to file Freedom of Information Act requests for documents related to the program, he was informed that no such program had ever existed. When he tried to interview other potential operatives, he discovered that most of them were already dead, often under circumstances that were difficult to explain. When he attempted to locate the facilities Nighthorse had described, he encountered military installations that officially served entirely different purposes, where access was completely restricted and questions were not welcomed. Torres published 2 follow-up articles before abruptly ending all investigation in 2006. In his final piece, he wrote, "I have been advised by sources I consider credible that continuing this investigation poses risks to both my safety and the safety of my family. I have been told in unmistakable terms that certain subjects are not meant to be explored by civilian journalists. I have been shown evidence that others who pursued similar lines of inquiry suffered serious negative consequences. I am therefore ending my investigation into this matter. However, I want to state clearly that I believe the core elements of what David Nighthorse described are true. I believe our government created and deployed operatives trained in psychological warfare techniques that went far beyond anything publicly acknowledged. I believe these programs may still exist in some form. And I believe the men who served in these roles deserve recognition for their sacrifices, even if that recognition can never be public." Torres died in 2009 in what was officially ruled a hiking accident in the mountains near Taos, New Mexico. His research materials were never recovered. David Nighthorse has not been heard from since 2005. The most recent evidence suggesting the program's continued existence emerged in 2019, when a Department of Defense budget document was accidentally released in unredacted form before being quickly withdrawn. Buried within hundreds of pages of line items was a single entry: Heritage Warrior Continuation, Fiscal Year 2020, $12.3 million. The entry provided no additional details about the nature of the program or where it was based. Follow-up inquiries by congressional oversight committees were met with explanations claiming the funding was related to Native American cultural preservation initiatives at military installations. No further information was released. Yet there are signs that the legacy of the Shadow Warrior program extends far beyond any officially acknowledged continuation. Over the past 2 decades, persistent reports have emerged from conflict zones around the world describing encounters with forces that employ tactics strikingly similar to those once used by the Apache operatives. In Afghanistan, Taliban fighters spoke of being hunted by what they called a silent death, something that moved to the mountains and killed without sound or trace. In Syria, both ISIS and government forces described facing phantom units that appeared and vanished at will, using methods that blended advanced technology with psychological warfare techniques rooted in ancient traditions. Intelligence analysts who have studied these reports, speaking on condition of anonymity, suggest that the techniques pioneered by the Apache Shadow Warrior program were adopted and adapted by multiple military and intelligence services across the world. The fundamental insight of that program, one analyst explained, was that the most effective warfare operates on the psychological level before it ever reaches a physical one. If you can break an enemy's will, if you can make them afraid of the dark, afraid of silence, afraid of their own shadows, then you have already won. What the Apaches understood, and what the military learned from them, was that this kind of warfare is not merely about tactics. It is about tapping into primal human fears that exist beneath conscious thought. Once you learn how to weaponize those fears, you create something that can never be fully defended against. The reservations where the original operatives were recruited have become places of deep and collective trauma. Elders speak quietly about the men who went away, and the ones who came back changed. Stories are passed down, never officially recorded, of veterans who returned unable to sleep indoors, who spoke languages no one recognized, who seemed to exist partly in this world and partly in another. Some communities held ceremonies in an attempt to cleanse these men of what had been done to them, but the results were uncertain at best. A medicine man from the San Carlos Reservation, speaking in 2012 on condition of anonymity, described a challenge. The old ways can heal many things. They can restore balance when balance has been disturbed. But what was done to these men went beyond disturbance. It was a fundamental alteration of who they were. The military took our warriors and turned them into something that does not fully belong to the human world and does not fully belong to the spirit world. They created beings that exist in between. Some of those men are still out there, living in remote places, unable to return to normal life. We leave food for them sometimes at the old places. By morning it is gone, but we never see who takes it. The families of the men who disappeared into the program carry their own heavy burdens. They live with the knowledge that their loved ones served their country in ways that will never be acknowledged, using methods that can never be discussed, and paying prices that can never truly be calculated. Some families still hope for answers. Others have abandoned hope and try instead to remember the men their fathers, brothers, and sons were before they were taken. In the National Archives, within classified sections that require the highest levels of security clearance to access, there are reportedly entire filing cabinets devoted entirely to the Shadow Warrior program and its many different iterations. Those files are said to contain operational reports, training manuals, medical documentation, and psychological evaluations that together reveal one of the most extreme military experiments in American history. They also hold letters, personal belongings, and photographs of the men who took part. Men who, in many cases, have no other official record that they ever existed. Men who were turned into ghosts by design and who remain ghosts by necessity. The question that haunts researchers who have tried to reconstruct this history is not whether the program was effective. All available evidence suggests that it was terrifyingly effective. The real question is what was created in the process and whether it can ever truly be undone. The men who passed through that training were altered at levels that may never be fully reversible. They were taught how to access parts of human consciousness that most people never encounter in their entire lives. They were given tools, both technological and psychological, that granted them abilities bordering on the supernatural. And then they were placed into situations where those abilities were not only allowed, but actively encouraged and rewarded. Some of those men are still alive. They live on the fringes of society, in remote places, under assumed names. They are now in their 80s and 90s. Yet according to those who claim to have encountered them, they remain formidable and deeply unsettling. They move differently. They observe things others overlook. They exist in a constant state of readiness that never fully switches off. For most soldiers, the war ended in 1945 or in 1973 or whenever their service concluded. For the Shadow Warriors, the war never truly ended. It only changed locations. The enemy changed faces, but the fundamental nature of what they had become remained the same. And there's troubling, persistent evidence that new recruits are still being trained. That somewhere in the desert Southwest, or perhaps in multiple hidden locations, young Apache men are still being approached with promises of serving their country in special and honorable ways. That the techniques and knowledge developed over decades of classified operations are still being refined and passed on to new generations. The program that officially does not exist continues to not exist, while its influence quietly expands. Its effects ripple forward through time, creating warriors who will never be honored, battles that will never be recorded, and victories that will never be celebrated. If you have followed this story to its end, you now carry knowledge that has been deliberately kept from the public for more than 8 decades. You now know about a program that transformed men into weapons of psychological warfare. You know about operations that violated every convention of civilized combat. You know about the cost paid by individuals, families, and entire communities, so that wars could be won through methods that could never be publicly acknowledged. And that knowledge comes with responsibility. The responsibility to remember what was done, to honor those who sacrificed even when their sacrifice can never be openly recognized, and to ask difficult questions about what we are willing to do in the name of national security. But beyond the history, beyond the horror, and beyond the hidden truths, there is a deeper message. The Shadow Warrior program succeeded because it tapped into darkness, because it embraced methods that dehumanized both the enemy and the men who carried them out. It achieved victory through fear and psychological destruction. It was effective, but it was not righteous. As you reflect on this story, I want to encourage you to turn toward the light rather than the darkness, to seek truth in the teachings of Jesus Christ, who show that real strength does not come from inspiring fear, but from embodying love. That true victory is not found in breaking others, but in lifting them up. In a world that continues to embrace shadows, choose to follow the one who said, "I am the light of the world." The men in this story were asked to become darkness. You have the choice to become something better. The files remain sealed. The programs continue. The ghosts still walk. But whether they walk into the light or remain in the shadows is a question that remains unanswered, waiting in the classified darkness of government vaults and in the silent memories of warriors who can never fully return home.